Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, let me start by saying that I appreciate the work done by Chairman Bonin, the House Budget Writers, the House Appropriations Committee. I also appreciate the work being done by our TDCJ employees and prison guards in what are very often very tough circumstances. But I must stand to offer this amendment so that we can continue to allow efficient, professional, private contractors to continue operating some of the prison and jail facilities in our state. This amendment moves funding in TDCJ Strategy C11, which is security operations, back to Strategy C112, private operations, just as it has been for years and years. Without this amendment, the cost of the state goes up and the cost of this budget goes up, with no improvement in quality or services. My amendment does nothing new. It simply maintains the current system that's worked well for more than a decade. I also believe that under this we can save at least $40 million in the process. Members, private operators are responsible stewards of state resources and inmates. Today is not the private prison world that you may have heard about 30 years ago when private prisons were still a novel idea. Today, private contractors efficiently and professionally operate TDCJ facilities and have done so for many years. On top of that, state law requires that privately operated prison facility contracts deliver at least a 10% savings to the state. Additionally, it's my understanding that these private prison facilities have done an equal or better job of recruiting and retaining
Mr. Speaker.
correctional
Mr. Moody,
officers.
for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield for some
Will the
questions?
gentleman yield for questions?
As soon as I finish my layout, I'll be happy.
Not at this time.
That they've done a better job of recruiting and retaining correctional officers, even though wages are lower than TDCJ due to lower reimbursement per inmate paid to private operators than those in TDCJ prisons and jails. Of note is that the TDCJ Sunset Report even says that staffing shortfalls and shortages have been made worse by TDCJ's own policies and practices. Members, there is no legislative or budgetary justification for this change. During the Sunset Review of TDCJ last interim, no mention was made of any problems with private operators or of any need or plan to transfer all prison and jail operations to TDCJ. In fact, TDCJ's 2026-27 LAR did not ask for more money to allow TDCJ to take over the operation of prisons and jails currently operated by private contractors. Instead, it specifically asked for only, quote, funding to maintain current operational levels for contracted programs and facilities, unquote. So under this budget, the entire budget, you're looking at adding at least 5,400 new FTE, state employees. Over 1,500 of those would be TDCJ because of the attempt to ban privately operated prison facilities. So in addition to that, you also have to pay not only a higher wage, but also retirement pension benefits, which would be a long-term cost to the state. Members, in addition to maintaining the status quo and operating performance requirements under these facilities, my amendment also effectively doubles the statutory mandated 10% savings by giving 20% and saves in this budget $40 million. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Moody, for what
Will the
purpose?
gentleman yield for some
Mr.
questions?
Gentleman yield for
Yes, I will.
questions.
Yes, I
Gentleman
will.
yields.
You mentioned the LAR that was submitted and that they didn't request any new funds. Did they request to have their funds depleted for this purpose?
I'm not advised of that. I do know, to answer your question, this was not covered, to my understanding, by Sunset or by the House Corrections Offices or anything in that regard.
You would agree with me that data and information and studies are important to inform us on the decisions we make when we're moving money like this. Information matters.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
Information matters, data matters, reports
Absolutely.
matter.
Absolutely.
Are you aware that studies and reports have shown over the years, and not just 30 years ago, that private facilities have higher rates of inmate-on-inmate violence and inmate-on-officer violence?
Actually, there was a report in the Dallas Morning News to that effect, but that is incorrect.
There's
As
a
matter of
Justice
fact-
there's a Justice
I'm gonna try to
Department.
answer your question. As a matter of fact, TDCJ has had more inmate suicides, serious incidents, and families murdered by escapees and other people murdered, injured by escaped parolees than privates have for the past 8 years.
Your attempt here is to grow that industry, and what I'm telling you is that studies, including, I'm not talking about the Dallas Morning News, but a Justice Department study just said that those things that I just stated. Are you aware that some private prisons have experienced issues with escapes and riots, furthering safety concerns?
I'm aware of this, that to my knowledge, there have been no problems or incidents in at least the past 2 years with the privately run facilities, the 7 that we have currently. Well, technically there are 8, but 7 that are TDCJ facilities that have been operated in the state of Texas. If that was a problem, I feel that TDCJ would have made that report, would have made that would have been part of the sunset process, that would have been part of the oversight of the House Corrections Committee, which they have, and I think that would be brought forward. It has not been. And
Mr. Spiller,
frankly, go ahead.
Report after report on private prisons, which you are expanding with this, growing. The reports that we have seen across the country have raised the concerns on safety that I've already listed, cost effectiveness, potential for exploitation, and just the fundamental fact that we will incentivize incarceration. Do you think we need to be incentivizing incarceration?
I don't think there's any way that this incentivizes incarceration.
Well, when you do this for profit, then you are incentivizing incarceration.
Well,
they make money by having folks incarcerated. We have an agency at the state, do we not, that does this job that has been understaffed, underpaid, and overworked. Why are you not trying to figure out how to focus to improve their facilities, instead taking these dollars to private operators who have repeatedly, in various reports, shown higher incidents of violence, higher incidents of lack of safety, of care of the inmates and the staff in those facilities? When you're working for profit, you know that you're going to cut costs as well. So when you cut costs in those environments, you're going to create more dangerous environments. You would agree with me that that's just the nature of how this works.
Well, I'm not sure which question you want me to answer, but let me take a shot at them in the order that I can recall.
Let me
go ahead and answer.
Let me answer your question.
You've asked me multiple questions. Let me answer one of them.
I'll do it one at a time.
Let me try one anyway, and I'll do the best I can. But first of all, I don't think it incentivizes. This is incentivizing incarceration. If that were the case, the state of Texas would be incentivizing incarceration more than private facilities because they're paid more. And the argument is that the truth is that private facilities operate much more efficiently. In fact, over the past 4 years, private facilities operate not at 10% more efficiently, they operate on average 25% more efficiently than the state of Texas. That's why we use private facilities. And as to your other about employees and savings, the vacancy rate, and this was a December 24 study that was completed, the vacancy rate for private facilities is 20%, for the state of Texas is 24%. So again, there's a 25% lower vacancy rate for employees in private facilities. So I dispute what you're saying. These are actually findings rather than just something quoted out of the Dallas Morning News.
I'm not reading from the Dallas Morning News, but you can continue to quote that if you'd like to. These are reports and studies that have been done over the years when it comes to private facilities, because private facilities, which are operating for profit, right, you would agree with me, a business is good. They're going to create, like you said, they're going to create efficiencies, right? Yeah. They're going to try to create efficiencies.
Yes.
In incarceration and when you're doing correctional work, when you cut and you create quote unquote efficiencies, that means you will have staffing issues, which you're going to create safety concerns in those facilities. We need to be focusing on shoring up those facilities within TDCJ so that they can do the job they're trained to do, that they do very well if we would have their back. This is taking the rug out from underneath them and sending funds to facilities that you're going to expand that have been ripe for these problems across the country. These are just facts.
Well, I respectfully disagree, and I think that the data in Texas
The gentleman's time has expired.
I move adoption.